Oh, happy, awesome Saturday, my beautiful friends. Good morning. It is wonderful to be here on this awesome Saturday. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Good morning, Shauna. Wonderful to see you today. And I see I have a couple other viewers as well. So good morning to you. Say hi to me, and I will say hi right back. It is indeed awesome Saturday. Happy awesome Saturday. Awesome Saturday is a Sabbath for me and for a lot of other people as well. We On Awesome Saturday, we come together to do awesome things, to hang out with awesome people in awesome places, to eat awesome food. And the Awesome Saturday service is an extension of the wake up call, which I do every morning at 9 a.m. on Monday through Friday. And during the wake up call, we basically just intentionally say nice things about ourselves and really affirm the truth of who we are. But in the end, the wake up call is empowered by a very deep spiritual well that I like to explore the concepts of on the Awesome Saturday service. So let's get some ass on the Awesome Saturday service. It is definitely a fun way to spend our Saturday. And the topic that I'd like to talk about on this Awesome Saturday is about giving and receiving. So I was woken up. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to be talking about today. I had a couple of different ideas kicking around in my head, but I was woken up by a knock on my door, a very insistent knock that got me out of bed. And when I went outside, my neighbor was standing out there, and he said, "Would you like to have an outdoor table?" And I mean, this is just like that. I didn't know that he was giving away an outdoor table, but he said, "Would you like to have an outdoor table? I'm giving away this very nice outdoor table, and I think that it would go nice in that spot right over there that you have." And I looked at the spot, and I looked at the outdoor table, and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll take that outdoor table." And he said, "Thank you so much for taking this table. It was in my way, and now I can do something else with my space, and I really appreciate you taking this off my hands." And then he and another friend of his came and just put the stuff right over in that spot where he thought that it should go. And as I was just witnessing this, bearing witness to this, that literally I got out of bed, or I wasn't even in bed, and somebody else was thinking about enriching my life. I got to thinking about giving and what is giving and what is receiving, and it reminded me of a poem from the book The Prophet, which is just a fantastic book by Khalil Gibran. And so I'm going to read that to you. I'm going to read this poem to you, and then as we do, then we'll just kind of talk about what the really salient points are in it. The poem's called On Giving. Then said a rich man, "Speak to us of giving." And he answered, "You give little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. For what are your possessions but things you keep and guard for fear that you may need them tomorrow? And tomorrow, what shall tomorrow bring to the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand as he follows the pilgrims to the holy city? And what is fear of need but need itself? Is not dread of thirst when your well is full the thirst that is unquenchable? There are those who give little of the much which they have, and they give it for recognition, and their hidden desire makes their gifts unwholesome. And there are those who have little and give it all. These are the believers in life and the bounty of life, and their coffer is never empty. There are those who give with joy, and that joy is their reward. And there are those who give with pain, and that pain is their baptism. And there are those who give and know not pain in giving, nor do they seek joy, nor give with mindfulness of virtue. They give as in yonder valley the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space. Through the hands of such as these God speaks, and from behind their eyes he smiles upon the earth. It is well to give when asked, but it is better to give unasked through understanding. And to the open-hearted, the search for one who shall receive is joy greater than giving. And is there aught you should withhold? All you have shall some day be given. Therefore give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. You often say, "I would give, but only to the deserving." The trees in your orchard say not so. nor the flocks in your pasture. They give that they may live, for to withhold is to perish. Surely he who is worthy to receive his days and his nights is worthy to receive all else from you. And he who has deserved to drink from the ocean of life deserves to fill his cup from your little stream. And what desert greater shall there be than that which lies in the courage and the confidence, nay, the charity of receiving? And who are you that men should rend their bosom and unveil their pride, that you may see their worth naked and their pride unabashed? See first that you yourself deserve to be a giver and an instrument of giving. For in truth, it is life that gives unto life, while you, who deem yourself a giver, are but a witness. And you receivers, and you are all receivers, assume no weight of gratitude, lest you lay a yoke upon yourself and upon him who gives. Rather, rise together with the giver on his gifts as on wings. For to be over mindful of your debt is to doubt the generosity of the generosity who has the free-handed earth for mother and God for father. I thought about that. I thought about that little poem as my neighbor was giving me some, as that table, and it really got me. It got me thinking about the joy of giving and the joy of receiving, and just the fact that as we go through life, everything that we have is given to us for one reason or another. And we might fool ourselves and think, oh, well, we've worked for it, or we've deserved this, or we are deserving of this thing, and other people are not because they haven't done something for it. But in the end, all of our giving reflects divine generosity. And so as we give, we mirror the nature of God. And as if you guys have listened to this to this service at all over the couple months that I've been doing it, God is. So God is love, and in particular, God is. And so when we look at life itself, we recognize this as being a manifestation of that divinity. And so God is the giver of life. God gives life, God gives love, God gives grace, God gives peace. And so when we give, we get to participate in that divine generosity. We get to admit that we also are all receivers, that each and every one of us have received plenty of things that we do not deserve. And so why on earth would we judge other people as being deserving or undeserving of our gifts? In the end, we become channels for blessing when we give. And because we are transcendent collective consciousness expressing as human on this plane of understanding, when we give, we also receive. The joy of the receiving is tied up in the joy of the giving. And so when we give, we get to experience the receiving because we get to be party to it, because we get to be there when the receiving happens, because we were there when the giving happened. And so ultimately, we reap what we sow. And when we give, we invite other blessings back into our lives. These blessings aren't necessarily material ones, they're spiritual ones. We get spiritual fulfillment, we get spiritual peace. What better way to overcome the fear of not having enough than to give to somebody else who doesn't have as much? How else could we overcome that fear? Whenever I'm worried that I don't have enough of something or other, and then I give it to somebody else, then surely I must have had an excess. Because when I give, I give from my excess. And so giving itself is something that allows us to experience that spiritual peace. Giving is an act of trust. Everything that we have, and that we keep around, as the poem says, for fear that we might not have it, that we might need it in the future, that we might need this thing, and that it would be really nice to have this thing in the future. And so we keep it. We keep it in a storeroom, or we keep it in a closet. We keep it in some place where we're not using it, but we do keep it. And the trouble, of course, with storing up our treasures here on earth is that moth and rust destroy those treasures, and that thieves break in and steal them. But when we store our treasures in heaven, when we store our treasures in a spiritual bank account, then who can take those, and how can those things be taken from us? How can they be stolen? How can they be destroyed? It always makes me sad when I go to my own storage unit and I realize that something that I had stored up for myself has been ruined because the storage unit isn't climate controlled, or that and I have to just throw it away. And so I spent the effort to put it there. I spent the effort to store it. Nobody else got any benefit out of it. I could have given it away, and I would have been better off for the giving. And so when we give, it is an act of trust. We trust that we're going to be provided for, as we always have been. Look at your life. Consider that all of the times that you have thought that you couldn't go on, you've still gone on, and that these things which have happened to us are so far in our past we don't even consider them. Life always works out, and because of that, we always have enough. I have been very wealthy in my life. I have been very not wealthy in my life too. And no matter what my bank account balance has looked like at various different parts of my life, I have always had enough. I have always eaten. I've always had a place to lay my head, even if it wasn't my place to lay my head. I have always kept on keeping on. And so as we give, we express trust in the future. We express trust in what is. We express trust in life itself to continue to provide for our needs. God knows our needs long before we ask for them. In fact, we don't even know what to ask for half the time because we really truly don't understand the larger forces that are moving in our lives, that are moving through this consciousness that we share, this reality that we share. Giving connects us to the collective consciousness because it allows us to acknowledge our place within a larger spiritual body. We are all connected. We're all connected through giving and through receiving. And sometimes we establish man-made systems to quantify how we are connected. Systems like money. It's a very helpful and useful thing. That's why we have it. But in the end, it also allows us to judge one person's contribution against another. And it opens up the ability for us to feel proud about how much we have, or shame about how much we don't. It allows us to feel feelings of fear about not having enough, or feelings of superiority about being able to give more than somebody else, or have more than somebody else, or trade it for nicer toys than the person who's next to us has. And yet in the end, it just blinds us to our inherent equality, the fact that we're born naked and that we will one day die naked, and that the only thing that persists through this life is the love that we share with each other. Giving connects us to that collective consciousness, because in giving we receive also. And it truly is more blessed to give than to receive, because in receiving we receive, and in giving we give and we receive at the same time. Giving gives us a tremendous amount of freedom, because first of all, it detaches us from the thing that we thought we needed to save up for ourselves later. And it also it allows us to be free from attachment to material possessions. Material possessions come and go. They're useful for a time, and then they're not useful at all, and then they're a burden. And when a material possession becomes a burden, we have to ask ourselves, well, is it worth it to keep this thing anymore? Is it worth it for us to maintain this object that is a burden to us? And of course it's not. It's not worth it for us to do that. It is worth it for us to give that thing away so that it can be a benefit to somebody else. I think about the things that I have stored, and they're stored up for a future that may never come. And the things that I have stored exist, and I acquired them in a past where they were previously useful, or where I thought that I would need them. And yet in this present moment, I don't find myself needing them at all. So why do I store them? Why do I store these things that are not useful today? And why do I then withhold them from somebody else to whom they might be life-changing? In the end, we give without expectations, because when we give seeking some reward or some recognition, we have received our reward in full. When we give thinking that other people are going to think more of us for our giving, then we have received our reward in full. And so therefore we do not give with the sound of trumpets on the street corners. We give in secret. We give, and the only ones who need to be party to our giving are the receivers. And the only ones who need to be party, or when we receive from others, the only ones who really need to be party to the giving is to the givers. The only reason that I mentioned the what happened to me today, insofar as my neighbor gave me a wonderful table and chairs, wonderful outdoor table and chairs, was because of the spiritual lessons it taught me. Not because I feel some crazy debt of gratitude to my neighbor. I recognize that my neighbor had an excess, and I recognize also that I now have an excess. And in fact, one of the things that I talked about with my neighbor as we were moving the table over, I said, well, now I have a table that's not quite as nice as this one that I can give to somebody who doesn't have one at all. And we just talked about how the furniture here in this community just sort of moves around, and that everybody eventually finds something, or eventually ends up with something more than what they had, and that it can come to them as a blessing. Sometimes giving can make us feel superior to the receiver, and we acknowledge that. Like, we acknowledge that occasionally these feelings can come up, but there's a humility that comes both in giving and receiving, because even as we give, we recognize that we have to be receivers too. That whatever I've received has been given to me from somebody for some reason. And I fool myself sometimes, and I think, well, I worked for that and I earned it. But in the end, have I really? Have I really earned anything? What was my material labor in one way or another suitable for trading with somebody else? In the end, I'm worth what I negotiate, and so are you. And since we're all worth what we negotiate, there is no objective standard of do this, get that. And since there's no objective standard in do this, get that, why don't we understand that we can also give, and with no hope of receiving anything else in return? Simply give for the joy of giving. And when we receive, why don't we receive and not think that we are now indebted to the person who gave? Because that debt that debt will put a damper on the joy that they receive in the giving. And so there is humility in giving. There is also humility in receiving, because as we give, we recognize that everything that we have was given to us by another, and everything that we have will one day go to another who did not work for it. Many of the things that I have right now are things that I did not work for, and these things were given to me from somebody else's generosity. And so so when I give with that same open-handedness. There is a tremendous joy that comes from giving, and a tremendous joy that comes from receiving as well. But in the end, when we are giving, and then if the giving fills us up with joy, then it aligns us with the purposes of serving and uplifting other people. And we all know that at one point in our lives, and probably in many points in our lives, we too have been, had the necessity of somebody else's largesse. Somebody else gave us something from the kindness of their heart, and it has been incredibly useful to us, and that it has been life changing. And I remember that the most powerful gifts that I've ever received have been gifts that I could not possibly repay, that I could not possibly ever do anything to deserve these gifts. And so as I enter into that, that cycle of giving and receiving, and as we all do with each other every day, as we all enter into that cycle of giving and receiving, let's understand that it is indeed more blessed to give than to receive, because in giving we also become receivers ourselves. And let's also understand that it's not about the stuff that we give away. It's not about the material that we give away. It's about our heart as we give. I have seen people give things away in bitterness. I've watched it happen. And I've watched people give things away that they just couldn't maintain anymore, and they gave it with great sorrow. And as they gave it with great sorrow, the person who received it also shared in their sorrow, even as they were receiving the gift, because they knew that they were only receiving it because somebody else was having sufficient problems that they were giving away something that they really didn't want to give. And so as we give, let's be cheerful about it. Let's be open-handed about it, and let's be open-hearted about it. And let's give of ourselves, because giving isn't just about material stuff. It's about giving of our own spiritual bounty, giving of our love, giving of our gifts. And to the degree to which we are able to give these gifts is the degree to which we are living a life that is actualized. And so as we go through our awesome Saturday today, and it is indeed an awesome Saturday, as we hang out with the awesome people who are around us, as we eat the awesome food, let's recognize that somebody gave us that food. As we hang around in the awesome spaces, let's recognize that somebody else prepared those awesome spaces and that we get to receive them. As we enjoy the awesome friendships with the awesome people that we have around us, let's recognize that these awesome people have given themselves to us, and that we are also have the privilege of giving ourselves to them as we share this experience called life. And as we do the awesome things that we are going to do today, and indeed I have a whole day lined up full of awesome things. Let's understand that the awesome things that surround us are ultimately fully capable of being given and received and traded around, and that as they are, it increases the overall spiritual health of our communities. Giving and receiving are beautiful things, and so let's make sure that our giving and that our receiving is something that brings us incredible joy, because as it does, it helps us to really develop ourselves and to help develop the people around us. Because as they as people who do not have trust in what is receive things from what is through us, it allows them to increase their trust and to realize and to recognize that life itself is working in their favor. That life itself, which desires the increase and the continuation of life itself, that life itself, uh, it it uh, it it exists through that giving and receiving. And so I just want to end this up with a little bit of a story. So when I was living in Costa Rica, the people down in Costa Rica, obviously this is the developing world. And so the material culture that I had grown up in really hadn't hit down there yet. For the most part, people had exactly what they needed in order to live their lives. Their houses were uncluttered and their closets were unstuffed. The stuff that they did have was useful to them. And I noticed that as I went through this, that occasionally others would come who were not from that culture, who were from a more consumerist culture, and that these people who were from the more consumerist culture would oftentimes, from their excess, give to the people who they thought were somehow impoverished. And I watched these people who were, according to the ones who were giving, impoverished, take that stuff and say thank you for it, but then and then turn right around and give it to somebody else because they already had everything that they needed. I saw also that sometimes people would come down, and these people would be on spiritual paths. They would be nomading around the world. They would be trying to find themselves. And I remembered how no matter what their faiths were, because these people had a lot of different kinds of faiths, I noticed and that life always seems to work out for them. I did a border run once with a guy, and this man taught me so much about giving and receiving, and without even realizing it. He had come down to Costa Rica with about $7,000, and very quickly had lost that $7,000 through some folks who had essentially who had just robbed him. And he ended up with this car. He had loaned this car out to a local, and that local had not wanted to bother. Had used the gasoline that was in the back of the car, and not wanting to replace that gasoline. What the local had done was had replaced the gasoline with water, so that the evidence of them using the gasoline wouldn't have been quite so obvious. Of course, my friend who owned the car was out in the middle of nowhere and was running low on gas, as you tend to do in the middle of nowhere in Costa Rica. There's not gas stations on every block. And so went to the back of the car and poured the gasoline from the car into the gas tank, not realizing that the person that he had loaned the car to had replaced that gasoline with water. Of course, you can't put water in a gas tank and expect the car to run, and the car never did work right again. Well, I was in this car with him after it had been fixed, and it had never really truly been fixed. That water was still working its way through the system, even after hundreds of miles, and after having the gas tank pumped, and after having all the stuff taken care of. And so this car was not particularly reliable. And we were driving through Costa Rica, and the car kept breaking down. I knew this guy didn't have any money. I knew that this car was the only thing that this guy pretty much had. I mean, he was sleeping in it, he was living in it, and so we had to do a border run, which basically meant that we had to go refresh our visas in order to continue being in the country. And so we embarked on this epic road trip to go down to the border in this car that just barely worked. And I remember the car would break down. And every time that the car would break down, I would think to myself, man, this guy is cooked. This guy would be better off to just take to sell this car for a couple of $100 and fly back to America and go back to where his support network is, because this clearly isn't working out for him. And every single time that that car was on the side of the road, here would come another person. Here would come another person that just so happens to have the expertise to keep that car moving. I remember we're in the middle of the banana fields in the middle of Costa Rica, in the middle of nowhere. And we're on the side of the road, and I'm trying to figure out where the local bus is so that we can get to a town so we can have a place to sleep that night. And then here comes this local in an old pickup truck, and he's like, "Hey, what's the problem?" And I'm like, "Oh, gasoline, or we accidentally put water in the tank, and so the car isn't working all that well." And the local was like, "Oh, well, I just so happen to have this tool that can help to pump more water out of the gas tank." And he, in the back of his truck, he produces this little tool. And then he's like, "Oh, and I have a battery charger and some jumper cables. And so here, let's just keep on revving this or cranking this engine until we get the water out." And we did. We got all the water, or we got the water that was jamming up the engine out of there. And I remember thinking to myself, what, how does this stuff even happen? Are we being visited by an angel? How does this stuff even happen? And when I really got to thinking about it, I realized that life itself was helping us get to the border. Life itself was helping this guy get along on his own spiritual path, even as even as some really bad stuff had happened to him in the country. And so that guy taught me so many lessons, because while I was freaked out about it, and it wasn't even my car. I mean, really, but my biggest problem was get down to the border in time so I could get my passport stamped. And I could have easily done that. I could have taken a cab to the border. I could have flagged down to the next person and gotten a ride into town and gotten to the border. My problems were nothing compared to this guy's problems. And yet my level of worry about those problems was so much higher than his, because I was worrying on his behalf. Well, in the end, we finally did get over to the border, and we handled everything we needed to handle. And in the end, I just watched unlikely thing after unlikely thing happen in order to get this guy where he was going. And he didn't seem concerned about it at all. He's just like, "Well, I guess we're on the side of the road now. Well, I guess we're driving again. Well, I guess we're on the side of the road again." And the level of detachment that he had gave me tremendous lessons about life. And so I think about that when I think about giving and receiving, about how at that time that guy who was in a much rougher spot than I was so much was so much more chill about giving and receiving, about giving of himself and about trusting what is. And so ultimately, as we give and as we receive, we trust what is. We trust life around us. We trust life itself to continue keeping on. And indeed, it will continue keeping on, as is evidenced by the fact that we are still here. All right, guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming by to the Awesome Saturday service. It's always fun to get some ass with y'all on a Saturday. Thank you again for just being amazing people. Good morning, Shauna, and also to the other folks who are watching but have not yet left a comment. It is wonderful to see you here today. Thank you so much for attending. And ultimately, if I could leave you with anything today, it is to to give with an open hand and an open heart, and to give without any expectation of receiving anything. Because as we as we do give, we come to an understanding that we have already received. And how could we give except that we all have already received? It is indeed more blessed to give than to receive. And so let's give generously of ourselves, of our love, of the material possessions that we have excess of the material possessions that we don't have an excess of. And in the end, we are binding ourselves to ourselves in a beautiful spiritual reciprocity. All right, guys, I'll talk to you on Monday at 9 a.m. We're going to come back at you with another wake up call. Until then, happy awesome Saturday. Saturday is indeed awesome. So let's hang out with awesome people. Let's do awesome things. Let's be awesome people. Let's hang out in awesome places. Let's eat awesome food today. Let's recognize our own inherent value and worth because we are awesome people. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Off to clean the attic. Hey, I know where your attic is, Shauna. But yeah, so we are awesome people. Let's recognize our inherent value and worth. The fact that you are on this side of the ground today means that you have the power and the authority to make any kind of change that you need to make in your life. Hey Nick, how's it going? Nice to see you on the Awesome Saturday service today. Much love to you, much aloha to you as well, and congratulations on your new baby. You're rocking it, man. Keep on raise that next generation right. The world needs it. All right, guys. I'll chat with you on Monday at 9 a.m. Until then, I love you. I appreciate you. I think that you are amazing. And once again, I will return on next Saturday with another awesome Saturday service, and then I will return on Monday with another wake up call. Until then, I love you. I appreciate you. I care about you. If there's anything that I can give to you, please let me know, and I will talk to you on Monday at 9 a.m. or around the pool today if I happen to see you around the pool. Till then, aloha from paradise.